is up, y'all? Thanks for tuning into the Crash Bang Boom podcast. Today's guest is Nick Jones of Noble Cooley Drum Manufacture. You know, continuing the discussion with drum manufacturers to gain a little more insight into what goes on into these drums that we all love to play. And with the history dating back pre-Civil War, there's definitely no shortage of cool history there. So hope y'all dig the convo. Shout out to my sponsors, New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking to release vinyl for your project, go on over to NewOrleansRecordPress.com for all your mastering, lacquer, cutting, design, packaging options, and more. They print both 12 and 7-inch records in 120 and 180 gram variants, and they do small runs and larger runs up into thousands. They can even turn around smaller runs quicker than most in the industry, so hit them up if that's what you're looking to do, and or if you're looking to do something even bigger. They got you covered. That's NewOrleansRecordPress.com. In an attempt to help out the musician community, keep your eyes peeled for artists offering lessons, master classes, tutorials, and more during this downtime from touring. Bandcamp and merch purchases can also provide some help during these tough times, not to mention live streams and all that good stuff. Maybe you can even get yourself a drum from Noble Cooley to help yourself with your anxiety. It's music therapy, y'all. So here we go. Nick Jones, Noble Cooley Drums. Crash, bang, boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Get the drum. Yes! All right, Nick Jones of Noble Cooley Drum Manufacture. How's it going, buddy? How you hanging in there?
It's going well. It's good. It's cold up here today. We just got 10 inches of snow overnight. So, first storm of the winter.
Wow, yeah. There's been a couple of snowstorms that have come through here in Salt Lake City, Utah, where we just relocated to. But so I'm getting used to that and just realizing that's going to be a long, long winter here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're coming from New York, right? So you should be kind of used to that.
Kind of used to it. Apparently a lot of snow comes through here, and I mean, hence this being one of the ski meccas in the United States, and everybody descending upon it because it's just surrounded by mountains. So there's all these winter sports that I know nothing about, being a guy who grew up in southeast Louisiana. You know, so as best as that gets is water sports, skiing behind a boat, kneeboarding behind a boat.
Yeah,
that's about as good as that's going to get. Rope swinging, hoping you don't land on any cypress knees and kill yourself. You know, that was more my summertime sport activity growing up. You know,
gotcha. Yeah, I grew up doing the behind a boat skiing, and then in the winter we do the downhill. So been doing it forever.
Nice.
You know, if you live in this type of climate, you got to find something outdoors to be enjoyable.
Right.
Or else the winter is just brutal.
I know. I 15 years in New York, and I never figured it out. I was always just like, winters suck.
No, it's my favorite season.
Really?
I look forward to it year round.
A true Northeast coaster you are, man.
Yeah, we are winter people here.
Absolutely, man. You were saying that you had a pretty rough November, it sounded like.
Yeah. I caught a touch of the COVID.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, not the most fun that I've ever had. I will say I feel very fortunate compared to what so many other people have experienced and gone through.
Of course.
I was never that sick. I had a fever for a few days, it lingered more than anything else. My taste and scent is still a little bit weird, and I have a little bit of like chest congestion still, like 3.5 weeks later. But
wow,
doing okay for the most part.
Wow, good for you, man. Well, having spoken to like A&F, Q Drums, Jenkins Martin, et cetera, you being the fourth manufacturer that I've spoken to, they were saying sort of in this COVID world that they were noticing that maybe people were more likely to just be buying a snare drum now, or kind of one-off drums, et cetera. How has this affected y'all with your manufacturing and everything? Is that something that you've experienced as well, or are y'all still pushing kits? How's it been working out for you?
Yeah, I mean, historically, we are more of a snare drum company than a kit company.
Okay.
It just kind of always has been that way. But I would say, if anything, we've been trending a lot more kits lately. We've been very, very busy and doing a lot of kits, a lot of add-on snare or add-on toms for, you know, people trying to expand their rig if they're at home and they're looking to just kind of freshen things up and change things up a bit.
Yeah.
But we've been doing a lot of kits recently.
Nice, man. Well, that is certainly good to hear.
Yeah, we've been weathering this very well. I'm feeling quite fortunate that, you know, in such challenging times for so many people, that a lot of people in the music industry have been doing pretty okay with it.
Right.
You know, a lot of the dealers I talk to say this is like one of the busiest years they've ever had. So
wow,
that's good for everybody involved.
All right, I guess they got that $1,200 check or unemployment or something, some Fed kicking something, throwing it at some drums to keep yourself from going insane.
Right, and it's, you know, you're not going out to dinner, you're not going to movies, you're not going to concerts. So, you know, whatever, if you're still employed, whatever that disposable income may have been can go towards something you can actually do while staying home.
Absolutely.
So we've been seeing probably a little bit more of that share of people's disposable income than maybe we normally would.
Gotcha, man. Well, tell me a little bit about the history of the company, because I know y'all been doing this for a pretty long time, and so maybe take me back to when it first started, and maybe what some of the drums were that were being manufactured at the time, and how those drums were being manufactured.
Yeah, sure. So we started in 1854.
Wow.
It was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. I am the 7th generation on the Cooley side of it. The Noble family kind of phased out after that first round.
Wow.
So we started off making toy drums originally, and they all would have been steam bent wood, kind of medium thick veneers, but single ply.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got contracted by the Union Army to make marching drums for the Civil War.
Wow.
And then after that, we went back to toy drums, and that was pretty much the bread and butter of what we did really up until about 2000, was mostly toy drums and the evolution of, wood to tin to various different types of manufacturing, from doing, skin heads to mylar heads to, whatever.
Wow.
But primarily toys. And we started doing the pro drums. We started prototyping in 1980. Our first production run was, I think, late 84, early 85.
Okay. Wow. All those years of that and just keeping it going. And I mean, I guess with those early run, like for the Civil War drums that you were making, for instance, what kind of wood was that being made out of? And like for how many plies, for instance, I guess?
It was all one ply.
Just one ply.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They were thinner. They were a lot thinner.
Uh-huh.
And also they didn't have to be round.
Right.
You're putting a stretched skin head over it. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle. You're not trying to fit a modern drum head on it.
Right.
But those were all Tulip originally.
Huh.
Which is how we got back into doing the Tulip solid shells a few years ago.
Okay.
So the original contract drums were Tulip because it was lightweight. It really didn't matter what they sounded like. It just had to be something that, a drummer boy, a kid, could carry around with them 24/7. Since that was the primary form of communication to people on the field.
Right.
They needed to always have it on hand. So it needed to be something that they could manage. So we built it out of Tulip at the time due to its lightweight nature. And then for the 150th anniversary of the Civil War, we made a small batch of those same drums using the same materials, the same machines, the same jigs to produce them that we originally did 150 years prior.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, we're like, oh, we should make a snare drum out of Tulip and take a picture with them.
Yeah.
And it turns out Tulip sounds amazing. And now it's probably one of our biggest selling snare drums that we make today.
I'll be damned.
Yeah, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Total weird fluke. We're like, oh, we should do this for a photo op. And then now it's my favorite solid shell snare drum that we make, and probably the most we've sold in the last year or two, I would guess.
Gotcha. It's funny. I haven't gone through some of the different seasons in marching band and this and that and the other, and playing in parades in and around New Orleans and everything growing up. I remember thinking, you know what? I don't actually enjoy doing this. This kind of sucks, but I suppose doing it during the Civil War would have been significantly worse. So I suppose I had it pretty good. Definitely first world problems on my behalf.
Yeah. Do it in a wool uniform and with bullets flying at you.
Yeah. Slightly different scenario.
It could be a lot worse.
Oh, man. On those drums, on the Civil War era drums, was there a snare mechanism that was under them, or was it basically just two heads tightened on top and bottom?
No, there was a catgut snare on it still.
A catgut snare.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the origins of the catgut snare? I've never heard of that.
I mean, that it was made from intestines. Like the snare wires were gut.
No way, really?
Yeah, man. I know. Seems gross now, but that is a thing that happened.
Wow, man. Well, when y'all started doing more professional drums or whatever, sort of out of the toy era there, you mentioned, I guess, maybe in the 80s, but especially in like 2000, what were some of the drums that y'all were doing at that point? And was there any particular wood and or sort of bearing edge that you found worked with particular woods, or, what was working for you?
Yeah, so a lot of our original R&D getting into doing the pro drums that started in the 80s was based around the old Radio King. We had a customer go into, if you're familiar with Bob Gatson, he owned a shop called Creative Music in Connecticut, and he's kind of legendary in the drum tuning, development, prototyping world. He's responsible for a lot of the Evan Sidario stuff.
Oh, wow.
And he is one of the main designers of pretty much everything that we do. He and my dad did a lot of that R&D back and forth to develop the product that we made. But it was one of his customers that had an old Radio King with a crack in it that came to him and asked if that might be something that could be fixed. And it kind of led us into getting back into building solid shell drums, because not many people, or really anybody, was offering a steam bent solid drum at that time.
Wow.
So that originally would have been only maple. Our snare drums were only maple up until about, I think, 2006. We started offering other woods.
Yeah.
And all of the bearing edges on those would have been a 45 with just an ever so slight round over on the backside, just enough to kind of break that edge so the friction of a head doesn't cause any problems on it.
Gotcha. Right on. And when you say Radio King, I'm familiar primarily with Radio King, having had and still have one of the Slingerland Gene Krupa Radio King snares that's chrome over brass with those really cool rims on it. Is that, when you say Radio King, are you referring specifically to that drum, or was Radio King part of a larger design?
No, the solid shell maple that they would have done at that time.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to remember the exact era that ran from. A long time ago.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And then once y'all started venturing out beyond the maple drums, what were some of the other woods that you found worked really well with particular designs? And then did bearing edges or anything like that change according to the wood type that you selected, or did you find that it was pretty universal with that?
Yeah, so a lot of that R&D that we did early on tried a whole bunch of different shell thicknesses, a whole bunch of different reinforcement hoops in the shells, and kind of went back and forth developing what worked best across a range of depths and then eventually to a range of woods.
Right.
So all of our solid shell snare drums are still 45s with a little bit of a round over. Actually, that's pretty true of just about every series of snare, from all the different ply ones, the metal ones. That's pretty across the board. The next woods that we started working with after maple, I think the first two we dove into after that were oak and cherry. We now do, if I don't do this in alphabetical order, I won't get it right. So we now do ash, beech, birch, cherry, maple, oak, tulip, and walnut.
Wow.
So it's all local hardwoods, all from New England. Most
Awesome.
of it comes from within the town of Granville that we're based out of, if not from the immediate surrounding vicinities.
And when you say solid shell, usually I'm because I have all metal drums and I know a little bit less about wood drums and plies and this and that and the other. When I think of solid shell, I think like in regards to metal drums being a seamless shell. But when you say a solid shell, are you just talking about a one thick ply? Is that
Correct?
That's what you're ultimately saying?
Yeah. So it's a steam bent monoply, single ply, solid shell, whatever word you want to associate with that. But it is a steam bent one piece of wood and then reinforcement hoops added on afterwards.
Got you. And is the thickness of those drums, is it relatively thin, sort of similar to some of the older Ludwigs and stuff from the 60s where you had those fairly thin shells, maybe 3 ply, and then you had the reinforcement rings with it? Is it kind of a similar density?
Yeah, our shells are all 1/4 of an inch.
Gotcha.
With 5/16 reinforcement hoops.
Awesome. Yeah, I've being born in the 70s and having a 70s kit and having tons of 70s records, I kind of always just look at 70s drum stuff, and that's kind of been what I've collected. But then I had a friend of mine who owned a studio, and he had a 60s Champagne Sparkle Ludwig kit that was that thinner ply with the reinforcement rings, and there is something pretty special about those drums. They sound amazing.
Yeah, totally.
Are there any of those older sort of vintage drums from any of those eras in particular that would have maybe informed some of the designs that y'all would embrace with this newer run of modern kits, or was it just sort of your own technology within the company, or the guy that you spoke to, I guess?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of all of that. So a lot of that R&D that my father and Bob would have done back in the day was looking at what they thought worked well from a lot of those vintage drums of, okay, well, we really like the thinner plies that work well with toms, but it doesn't translate. They get a little bit too uncontrolled and big when you translate that to a floor tom or a bass drum. So we'll do a little bit of a thicker shell for that. And that's kind of what we ended up going with at the end of the day is varying thicknesses based on size as you scale up the kit. So snare drums are all, all of our solid shell snare drums are the same thickness, but the kits stagger ply thicknesses as they increase in size.
Got you. Interesting, man. As far as badges, and I've seen you'll do some interesting stuff with badges from what appears to almost...
we have too many of them.
I know. I was going to say, like, it's funny. When I think about the Ludwig, for instance, man, you pretty much have, like, the Keystone badge, and then you have, like, the blue olive badge, and maybe the blue olive badge has sharper edges than rounded edges, and you could sort of tell the difference. But I was just looking at some of the ones that y'all have. You have the one that has the marching snare guy on it. You've got what appears to be, like, burnt into the shell. You've got the other badges that sit actually relatively lower on the snare drum, sort of in the zone of maybe the bottom half of the throw off, for instance. So I guess tell me a little bit about the evolution of badges, because it seems like y'all certainly have quite a few of them.
Yeah, we do. As I said, we have too many. I'm joking, but I'm not joking. Like there is something simple and easy about seeing, a Ludwig badge. You recognize it from a mile away, because they have essentially one for the most part.
Yeah.
You see a big chrome circle, you're like, oh, that's a DW. Like,
right.
There's one.
Yeah.
We have a different badge for every series of drum that we make.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Okay.
I mean, for the most part, we're slowly getting to the point that the shape is at least becoming the same, and then the text on it signifies the series of drum that it is. But that's not true across the board. There's still one kit and 2 snares that use an oval badge, and all the rest are a hexagon at this point.
Right.
So there's variation, and then there's the wood burned one, as you said. So we offer the wood burn logo on any wooden shell that we make.
Cool.
It's an option that you can put on anything. Otherwise, if you don't go with that, then we have a badge for each series that comes in, for the most part, 1 or 2 colors that accompanies the hardware. There's something like 9 or 10 configurations of badge, depending on what series, what finish hardware, and what options you want.
Wow.
And we recently started doing that wood burn look as a reveal logo in the paint. So if you want if you're buying a copper snare drum and you want to see that copper, but you want your drum to be black sparkle, we'll do that so you get just the copper outline of the logo on a black sparkle drum.
Wow.
So it adds another option and another layer of challenge and confusion for us.
Right. You mentioned copper, man. I was rolling through your Instagram feed and noticed a copper brass snare that y'all had. Looked like it might have been 14 by 8.
Yep.
That was a beautiful snare, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was striking. I keep looking at it, just kind of fantasizing about it. It's almost sexual.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I've been wanting to do the copper with the brass for a while, and we haven't had a customer ask for it, and I just haven't had the time to build a drum for the fun of building it to see, what it would look like.
Yeah.
And we had a guy that I've been working with for a long time reach out and be like, yeah, I think I want to see brass on copper. And I was like, yes, finally.
Finally.
That was the first one that we did with that, and I love that look. I thought it was a wonderful combo.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful, man. There was another kit that I was looking at. I forget how long ago. Hopefully it'll strike your memory, but it was a green kit with gold hardware on it. And I was like, man, green's my favorite color, and I love gold. I'm a New Orleans Saints fan, so I love gold shit, So I was like, between green and gold, man, you're hitting on all cylinders there. What was the story with that kit?
That is a kit that we did for Drumazon over in the UK. And actually, that kit is one of the first, if not the first, that has the reveal logo on it.
Okay.
So if you go back and look at that picture,
That's
you'll
right.
see that it has that wood burn shape logo that is natural wood, and the rest of the kit is green. The lugs on it became standard on our walnut kits that we do, and we now offer them as an upgrade option on any kit. They're solid brass. We machine them and build them in-house, and then we either polish and lacquer them or send them out to get chrome or black plated afterwards.
Nice.
I love that green and brass combo.
It's beautiful. Gorgeous. Beautiful. And with the cattle brand stamp, as I'll call it, is that literally, are y'all just putting that in a fire and heating it up and physically stamping it, or am I oversimplifying that a tad?
You're not oversimplifying it. It's just a different method of heating it. It's an electric cattle brand, essentially. So you plug it in and it gets really hot, and then we push the shell against the brand so that's held still and square and centered.
Gotcha.
As opposed to freehanding it against the drum.
Understandable.
But I mean, it is that. It's just it's a cattle prod essentially.
Yeah.
Then you just plug it into the wall and wait half an hour.
Right. Holy moly. Another thing that as far as I could tell, it looked like y'all have your own designed some of your hardware, be it throw-offs and whatnot. At the very least, I saw the NNC logo on it. From talking to some of these other drum manufacturers, those types of hardware products and whatnot can be really expensive to develop. So a lot of times people just, especially when you're sort of up and coming, they'll just use like indie stuff. And then, you get those throw-offs and you get the hardware, and then, you obviously know the dimensions, you get them in there. But was it a process getting your own sort of hardware happening?
I mean, so we started doing that at the same time that we were prototyping the drums back in the early 80s, and we've been using that throw-off ever since.
Awesome.
So that is cast for us in Connecticut. We then have to sand them, buff and polish and lacquer them, or send them out to be plated. And the guts of the throw-off we get in as flat brass stock, and we have die sets and machine presses here to actually form and drill and tap and rivet the components together to make it. So
wow,
the throw-off is completely done in-house. Actually, most of anything brass on our drums, all of that hardware is done here. But yeah, so there was definitely R&D and for sure an upfront cost on getting the die set up, but
right,
that would have been absorbed and done back in 1983, 84, and it's been the same one ever since.
That is amazing. Good for y'all. Because it's interesting. I was speaking to I forget honestly if it was Jeremy Berman over at Q Drums or if it was I don't think it was ANF, or maybe it was Scott Jenkins at Jenkins Martin. But he was saying in this day and age, having like some of these components, whether it's lugs, throw-offs, etc., like designed in America, the cost is so outrageous now that basically you can't.
Yeah, totally. He's not wrong. The last thing that we had designed and made, unfortunately, it is made offshore. It was designed here. The suspension system that we use, the Cool mount, is a proprietary hardware mount for our rack toms, and it becomes uneconomical to try to do that domestically.
Wow.
So that is made overseas, but I designed it here, built it for my brother's kit. I'm actually looking at the first one we made through the window in the studio I'm sitting in.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so it is for that reason that we still don't use our own design of spur or floor tom leg. I have drawings and designs for both of them. You just can't find somebody to make it, and I don't like sending things overseas if I can avoid it.
I hear you.
We own our molds for our own die-cast hoops. We used them for years.
Amazing.
We have wonderful, wonderful die-cast hoops. The manufacturer that cast them for us in the Boston area went out of business. So now we have to try to find someone to competitively produce them for us domestically, and that's real hard to come by. So
wow,
we've been using other hoops for a while now that obviously we'd like to get back to casting our own.
Wow.
But the cost of doing that is ridiculous. So
as far as lugs, were you able to design your own lugs as well?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Nice.
All of our lugs for everything we do, whether it's the small separate little lugs, we developed those back in like 1993, I think, for the CD Maples kits, and now we use those for CD Maples, Horizons, and the new Union series.
Mm-hmm.
And the hoops the lugs for the walnuts are those brass ones that you saw in that green kit.
Yeah.
And we build those completely in-house. So all of our lugs are our own design.
Awesome. That's amazing that y'all were able to, it sounds like, sort of invest and get that going on when you did, because again, it seems especially problematic trying to have it done now. And then, especially during COVID, it's not like that's made anything easier either. So
no, the hardest thing that we've had a challenge getting during this time, and I'm sure probably all the other drum manufacturers that you've talked to is the same thing. Heads.
Right.
Heads are the hardest thing to get right now. It's ridiculous. We've gotten maybe 3 shipments from Remo since this whole thing started going down. They're just, it makes sense. They switched to making face shields early on. Now they're overwhelmed playing catch up on everything else. And, if you're having your logo screened on them or something, it becomes a non-stock item for some people. We don't do that. We just use standard heads. But still the availability of them, the sourcing of that is one of the hardest things for us to come by this year.
Gotcha.
You know, we've always let people just kind of tell us what heads they want on their drums, so they ship from the factory with whatever you want. And this year I've been telling every customer or dealer, like, look, you can tell me what you prefer, but you might just get what you get, or you're not going to get your drums. So
Yeah, right. Damn.
it's weird. Thankfully, everybody understands. We're all in this together.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
It is what it is.
Wow. With some of these drums that you've done, are there any particular ones that it was almost painful to let go because they sounded so good and or looked so good, or maybe you redesigned it, having designed it for someone else,
There are plenty. There are. There's a list of them. Actually, one of them is up for sale right now that I saw the other day, and it was a 7x14 ash that we did that had to have been the best looking ash shell that we've ever made. That I just every minute of working on it was a joy, and I didn't want to let it out the door.
Really?
And I was very sad to see it go. And that is not my first choice for a solid shell drum.
Right.
And it just I didn't want it to go. And there have been many of those over the years.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the nature of the business. You can't keep them all.
Can't keep them all. What about sound wise? Has there been anyone in particular, depending on what you prefer, whether it's high crack and pingy or more low depth thuddy style, or was there any particular design that sonically you were especially enamored by?
Yeah, my two favorites easily are, of the solid shells that we make, my favorite is a 6x14 Tulip. It's a little bit warmer. It has that nice bottom end to it. It's a little bit different of a drum. And my favorite ply that we make, which is my favorite of all of our drums, is a 6x14 Horizon. I like the 6-inch depth. It cuts through really well. I got accustomed to that one from the other side of the kit. I play in a band where I'm the bass player.
Okay.
And listening to it, and we're practice in a rehearsal space here at the studio, and the drummer in that band, was just using the drums we had here. Obviously, it kind of makes the most sense. And I'd thrown one of those that was a stock one on the kit, and he ended up using that at practice for probably about a year, and I grew to love that sound. And now, like, if you ask me what a snare drum sounds like, that's what I picture in my head. Like, that is my perfect sounding drum.
Wow. And also, props to your drummer for getting that gig to be able to practice at your studio there and be able to, let's check this out,
That's funny. When he first showed up, we found him on Craigslist, and when he first showed up, he hadn't played drums in a while, so he had gone on Craigslist separately and picked up, like, various components to throw together something to show up to rehearse with.
Oh, wow.
And I did not tell him where he was going. I just gave him an address, and he showed up here and went, holy shit, what is this? And I was like, oh, you can use my kit. You don't have to bring one in. We're good here.
Right. Crazy, man. You mentioned playing bass in a band. Is bass your primary instrument, and then it's more of a drum design avenue for you?
Yeah, I'm not a drummer.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's the weird nature of it being a family business is I don't play the drums. I have a kit. I'm terrible at playing. But my brother's a few years older than me. We grew up playing in bands together. He started on drums at a young age, and it didn't really make sense for both of us to be drummers. And just kind of, as fate would have it, I'm here building drums, and he's working for a graphic design agency. So whatever. That's kind of how it shook out. But yeah, no, I'm not a good drummer.
That's wild. Obviously drum design has been a part of the family for many generations. Has there also been family bands at any point that you know of?
Yeah, it's more of a design and manufacturing sort of thing. My father doesn't play any instrument at all.
Wow.
I don't really know, going back before that, what family members had played in the past.
Yeah.
But of our generation or the existing still living generations, my brother and I are the only musicians.
Wow. Yeah,
it's just kind of how things work.
That's the way it goes. That's wild, man. Yep. For some of the artists that play your drums, I believe Jack Ryan of the Marcus King Band. By the way, that kid is great. I actually got to interview him when the Marcus King Band they came through New York, and I showed up for sound check. And right after this, so I got to hear him playing them both on and off of the PA, and in both scenarios, they sounded great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was cool. So it was cool talking to him about that and everything. And then when thinking about manufacturers to talk to, I was like, oh, I should totally reach out to Noble and Cooley, because I remember thinking that kit sounded great, and Jack's a great guy.
Yeah, he is.
He has a pretty good knowledge of drums himself and a pretty good collection. I've actually texted him before when I was thinking about buying a vintage kit, and in that particular instance, he said, I don't think you should get that. And I was like, thank you. I was about to buy that shit.
Yeah, no, he knows what he's talking about. He's always a good one to chat to, for sure.
Yeah, man.
I'm in the process of prototyping a new snare drum right now, and I was talking with him 2 days ago about some iterations and changes we need to make on it. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Who are there some other guys that are out there playing some of these drums?
The easiest answer to that is head over to the section of our website of like known artists to use them, not endorsers. We don't have a big artist roster.
Gotcha.
But there are plenty of albums that they show up on.
Oh, cool.
Phil Collins has been an endorser since 1989 for our snare drums. I think Trey Cool owns 17 of them now. Yeah, they're out there and around, but most of the guys that are playing them are studio musicians, or it's studios that own them, so they end up on a fair amount of records. Right. Pearl Jam's 10 was recorded with a 5-inch maple solid shell.
No way. Oh, that's a famous snare sound.
Yeah, Matt Chamberlain used it for One Headlight for Jacob Dylan.
Awesome.
They're out there and around. You hear it more frequently than you know, I guess is the easy answer.
Right, right. That is awesome.
And we have a section on our website where you can kind of go see albums that they've shown up on that we find out about after the fact. Got an email from the dude from Tears for Fears a while ago.
Oh, wow.
Asking about refurbing a snare drum that he's owned forever. And I was like, oh, cool. When did you get this? And it was like, before they recorded like all of their big hits.
No way.
Like, all right, cool. That's fun to know.
Oh my God. Songs from the Big Chair is like one of my favorite albums. I have that on vinyl, but my family, we all listen to that record all the time. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah, so to find that out way later by getting an email from the dude to be like, hey, I need to send it back to get the lugs cleaned up after 25 years. Like, oh, okay.
Wow. That's amazing. Super cool, man. What do y'all have going on in 2021? Any particular plans, or just weather the storm and get through it and keep it going?
We have a lot of new stuff slated for 2021. We're working on a couple new designs for a new series of kit, as well as a couple different iterations of snare drums that we have coming out still. We just launched a new kit, I think probably 2 months ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna let that one ride a little bit before we put out the next version of something. But we've got a whole bunch of irons in the fire right now that hopefully will be seeing the light of day in 2021.
Awesome, man. Sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. If I end up back out there on the Northeast Coast or anywhere near you, I'd love to come see the place sometime, connect the dots, and see all this stuff. Yeah, it was definitely fun talking to you. Thanks for cluing me in on the history, the deep history of the company and everything, and all the processes and the evolution of it throughout the years, man.
Yeah, pleasure chatting with you.
Absolutely. Good talking to you, Nick.
Thanks. You too.
All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in as always. Thanks to Nick for rapping. Definitely enjoyed the insights into how these drums are made, the single-ply steam bent shells, and all the accoutrement. And I dig the conversation getting nerdy with these cats. We'll catch you on the next one. Crash, bang, boom.